Welcome. Karima, so first of all, come 3:30 this afternoon, broadly, what are you expecting?
I'm expecting that the charges against former President Jacob Zuma is going to be reinstated. What I'm curious about is who is going to prosecute this case and whether it's going to happen in KwaZulu-Natal, because what you see in KwaZulu-Natal in the NPA is a deeply compromised structure, and of course if the case is bungled, we could have a travesty of justice. So I'm going to be looking out for that, Jeremy.
Angela, what would have been weighed up as far as the NPA is concerned?
Well, I presume they're weighing up the contemporaneous ability to recall the evidence, given that we're now a decade on from when the last situation got abandoned, and whether or not all of the witnesses are still going to be around to give credibility and substance to the case that has to be mounted. So there will be some kind of statement around this. But as Karima has indicated, I seriously doubt that Shaun Abrahams, given his own reputation is at stake, given the integrity of the state's ability to be serious about fighting corruption is at stake, can come out at that time and tell South Africa he's not reinstituting the charges. If that is what he intends to do, there will be severe repercussions across this weekend coming in the political economy of South Africa.
All right, we can talk about the potential repercussions either way, but Karima, I want to talk about two time lags if we can.
Yes.
One is the time lag that Angela has already mentioned, that it's a long time and witnesses' memories become a little clouded perhaps. The other side is the prevarication by Shaun Abrahams in making this announcement. So let's start with that first of all. Did he have to drag it out for such a long time?
No, not at all. I think he has milked this and he has tried to play politics. The court's decision on this was absolutely clear. When the state admitted that there was no rational reason for the charges to be dropped, Shaun Abrahams could have moved with speed. What he did, of course, was try to read the tea leaves in the African National Congress. As you know, there was a bitter contestation that happened, and we see, of course, this haste post-Nasrec when there is a new sheriff in town. So Shaun Abrahams deeply, deeply discredited. I mean, the court has, of course, also indicated this. They've indicated that he's tried everything, Jeremy, to not get to this point to reinstate the charges. And, of course, his own suitability to hold office is also in question. So I think he milked it. He didn't have to drag it out. All this drama about, you know, him having to be presented with the evidence, him having to consider it and setting these time lags. It was an elaborate ruse to buy time, to read the political tea leaves and to play politics. He could have come to this decision a lot earlier.
So why weren't people calling him out on this a lot earlier?
I think they were calling him out. If you recognize organizations such as Corruption Watch, organizations such as CASAC had gone to court, for example, because if you remember the context of all of this, of course, is state capture, and the NPA hasn't been spared. The NPA has been deeply, deeply compromised, so much so that you have a current case before the Constitutional Court that says Shaun Abrahams should not be in his position because the entire process has been flawed. So you could have a situation where he reintroduces the charges, but he could potentially be removed from office.
And just quickly, what about Angela's other point about the time lag in terms of a decade on, and whether this is still going to have the traction it did when the charges were initially preferred?
Well, what is interesting is in the submissions, Shaun Abrahams had said that the 200 and odd witnesses that he had tracked down has all been prepared to give evidence. So that's the one good thing. People are prepared to speak, they're willing, they're there. What is interesting is if you look at this prosecution team, the one person with the institutional memory is, of course, Billy Downer. He's a career prosecutor. He's the one that kind of spearheaded the matter when the Hawks were still the Scorpions.
And champing at the bit, no doubt.
And champing at the bit. So therein lies some of the issues. But I do think there will be questions around, you know, whether the evidence has gone cold and that sort of thing. And I think my point about KwaZulu-Natal and the NPA structure there and their capacity and integrity to try and prosecute this case honorably is going to be something that we need to watch very closely.
Let's flesh that out in just a moment. But Angela, to Karima's point about the tea leaves within the governing party, those tea leaves haven't settled, though, whichever way this decision goes at 3:30 this afternoon, or have they?
I don't think they have, and I suspect that there will be, as always around Jacob Zuma in the ANC, divided opinion inside the party all the way up to its topmost structure. And we're likely to see, if not slightly contradictory positions being vocalized in different locations by people who are in the NEC, but also in government and also doing electioneering work for the ANC, saying things that are slightly different, which will indicate the kinds of division around Jacob Zuma that we know that the top 6 officials have announced. But also beyond that, there is the star witness, the man who did go to prison and got a medical parole and indicated last year that he's willing to turn state's witness, the man with the surname Sheikh. And that's, I think, part of what I think many South Africans are going to want to hear, because we have now waited, as you've indicated, and as I've indicated, it's more than a quarter of my life since these events started. And I know people look at me and think I'm old. I'm in my 40s. This was 10 to 12 years ago when the initial issues began. The actual arms deal dates back to the previous millennium. So for young South Africans, this is a very long road to have travelled. And so there are people who will be listening to this today who will not have been born when this began in the late 1990s around the arms deal, and in the early 2000s when Jacob Zuma was deputy president to Thabo Mbeki, and will have forgotten or never have seen as adults the statement by Thabo Mbeki that he has to relieve his deputy of his duties because of these court issues. So really, we are in 2018, this began in the early 2000s.
Come on, Angela, let's not bring age into this whole thing, because I had less backache 10 years ago than I have now. I want you, and we're going to go to my colleague Tulas Sizwe Similani. I think there he is. Tulas, we're coming to you in just a moment. He's outside the NPA offices in Pretoria.